Great. Thank you all very much for being here today. We had a little strategy session a few weeks ago. So like I said, we're gonna kind of each do a little part. As I've mentioned before, if you've been to the last one of these, we don't have the answers. We don't know what we're doing, but we're just doing the best we can. Personally, I have a goal of finding my unconscious biases and becoming, I guess I like to say, just I want to be a better human. And having a conversation about inclusion is really awkward, and it makes me uncomfortable. And I don't think that there's another way to get better than to do the uncomfortable, awkward thing. So thank you for being here and being part of this today. And to get started, what I'd like to do is just take a minute, and we're going to do a little visualization. So if you'd please take a minute, take a deep breath, close your eyes. All right. You're rushing to the airport. You're late for a flight, but you make it to the plane in the nick of time. As they're closing the door behind you, the pilot steps out of the cockpit and says hello. You arrive at your destination and go to a local restaurant and have the best meal of your life. Next to you at the table, there's a couple happily celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. The next day, you walk into a conference, and the keynote speaker for an up-and-coming technology company is a woman. Whoops, I've got it all backwards. Sorry, I'm just learning this whole visualization thing. So anyway, the point is now you open your eyes, and I have some questions for you, and I'm supposed to ask you, in your mental image, was the pilot black? Was the couple 2 men? Was the CEO a woman? I never was good at telling jokes or apparently telling stories, but I'm working on it. And what I want to tell you is that it's okay if the answer was no. When we're immediately confronted with these types of questions, the most ancient part of our brain responds, and we don't have time to really ration a response. And I borrowed this visualization from a TEDx conference by TEDx talk in Pasadena by Valerie Alexander. And I'd be glad to share a link for that to you. And the point is, it's a way of understanding, like trying to uncover your unconscious bias is what she talks about. And she does it a much more proficiently than I was able to even run you through the visualization. But the important part is to know that this can change. And by being open to changing our immediate perceptions, we can have other ways, we can imagine other ways for the world to be, and to get, by discovering these unconscious biases, we can become better humans. And now I'm really nervous and sweaty, and I'm going to pass it over to Jia so that she can do the next
Well,
part.
I'm just laughing because people should feel free to share what they pictured too. It doesn't necessarily mean we have a bias, but I knew what this exercise is kind of going to be like. So when Shannon talked about a couple, I saw this young, blonde-haired, blue-eyed couple for some reason. So not only white, but just a specific type of look. But then this time, even knowing it, I was surprised at how quickly these images popped up in my head. And I was just laughing to myself because I was like, why was the pilot a Latino man? And then, but I don't think it's because I knew it before. And then the couple, you said 50th anniversary, so they're older. And then when you said a CEO, I did picture a woman. And then when you said tech, I was like, I realized my mind started scrambling and looking for like a young tech bro. Very disturbing. or just interesting, because right when you said tech, my mind started buzzing like it had to reset the vision for some reason, or just check it. So that was my bias, I guess, about who's working in tech right now. But so the last meeting was pretty cool. It was really new to us, and I think a lot of the energy by the end was obviously solution oriented, because it's hard to feel a lot of strife or have a lot of revelations and realize it's important and have a good heart, and then you want to do something ASAP. And especially because there are a lot of things being done, and people were very much of the mind, not everybody, but just sort of like, hey, we need to organize and learn about what each other is doing. And that can definitely happen offline. But now what we were feeling is, at least for this meeting. It's about sitting with the discomfort of learning new things or probing issues that normally it's deliberate. So normally if you just live your life, everything seems fine, you know. We're in an inclusive sport, a sport that we a lot of us cherish because it makes us happy. You know, maybe we ourselves feel like we would happily welcome anyone. So it's a little bit weird. And so this is going to be, if it's okay with you all, sort of a forum where we can listen to several different voices and just be and just sit there. So whether or not any of you do yoga, I think yoga is a good analogy just because a lot of the time, if you feel like doing an exercise that's really active, you might think, what am I doing sitting in this weird position for a sustained period of time? And I'm uncomfortable, and what is this really doing? And then later you might see some of the effects or the importance of that. And a lot of what, well, I'll really let Naji take the floor a little bit more later, but it's important to be able to hear a lot of different points of view. And some of those voices are saying, actually, you know, thanks for the intention. And, but the worst part is sometimes just realizing there isn't a solution right now, or the solution is just to slow down a bit and be a little more introspective together, and just manage that energy and regroup, and also especially look back at precedents, at history, really deliberately look back and challenge the things that you've seen before, that you think you've seen before, or that people are, and the mainstream media is bringing up again. Because it's on us as individuals to go digging, and that's certainly a type of action, and it's organically going to be a part of the solution, a more sustained solution. That's my opinion anyway, but that's sort of, I think, if Naji and Shannon agree, the spirit with which we're starting this. So if anyone feels like adding to that, or please feel free. And if you feel a little uncomfortable or disappointed and you wanted it to be more of an action item type of meeting, there's an outlet for that, because Shannon's been stockpiling all of the resources that people have brought up, and a lot of us are also meeting each other for the first time in this way, and we might find alignment with one another beyond just these Zoom meetings too. So that's my part of it. So I'd like to introduce Naji.
Yeah, well, I mean, either through Facebook or directly, I know a lot of you on the screen, so welcome. And I'm glad you're all here. And it's totally not surprising that's mostly women, because women seem to always do the right thing, where my gender is beyond screwing up, but that's a whole nother Zoom meeting for another day. Anyway, I want to thank you all for coming here. This is really exciting, and I resonate with what Jia just said. There are no easy answers. I had to know, I've been having to deal with this for 55 years, there are none. But there is inquisition, you know, or being inquisitive. There is asking questions, which I strongly encourage you to do if you have those, whether through email or text or whatever. You can get my number from Shannon if you want, and you can text me or whatever. Most of my focus for this time, when I speak, will be dealing with history. I know a lot about the swim history of African Americans in the Black diaspora, dating back, 1400s. We've been doing this, actually. No, it's even further back than that. But anyway, I'll get into that later. Also, you know, just dealing with the uncomfortableness, as Gia said. I use the analogy of, you know, we're all marathon swimmers. We've all had great training swims. We've all had really lousy training swims. We've had, you know, great swims that we finished where it's been flat as a board, and then it's other times everything went to crap. This kind of unpleasantness sometimes is when it's going to get really choppy. The swells are going to be really big, the winds are going to be going, and every time that you breathe, you're just looking at that boat saying, man, I want to get back on that boat. I want to get back on that boat right now. Screw this. I don't care how much money I put into this. I want to get back on the boat right now. But what do you guys do? And I've seen you do it 100 times on your YouTube videos, and some of you I've seen doing in person, like Shannon. You stick your head down and you keep swimming until you run out of water. And that's what I love about this community, is its ability to say, I will beat this. I will overcome this. So with that being said, I want you to keep that attitude. It's going to get choppy. It's going to get bumpy. I'm not saying I'm doing that to you today. But sometimes when you go out in the real world, you're going to have people who are going to have a lot of anger. You know, they've been storing it up for a long time, especially right now with this pandemic and the psychopath that's running this country into the ground, the lynching of George Floyd. You know, there's a lot of built up aggression. And because we're mostly sheltering in place, this is the opportunity for us to try to like make some things happen. I never thought this would happen and stuff. So I've always said there's positives in this pandemic. That's one of the main positives, that we can talk to each other and try to really move forward. So with that being said, I have a ton of resources. I have the history, and, you know, that's where I'm approaching it from, especially for my own community, which is, you know, somewhat at fault for not getting back into the water, which I'm trying to self-correct. But yeah, let's keep it lively and fun as well. I mean, I know it's uncomfortable. I tend to joke a lot, and especially about my own swimming ability half the time. But you know, let's make it that. And once again, I'm thankful that you guys are all here, and I'm really excited for us to, you know, be on this journey together. So, Shannon, take it away.
Me, take it away. You're the one that's taking us on this journey, Naji.
All right. So I'll start in, but I still want you two to come back if you like.
Maybe.
Yeah, like I said before, why they said this, I don't know, but both Kevin Dawson and Jeff Wiltsey, who are both friends of mine. Kevin Dawson is a professor down at the University of Merced. He wrote a brilliant book on called The Undercurrents of Power, about African Americans and Africans in the diaspora, and not only our swimming prowess, but also our canoe building skills, our surfing skills. By the way, we're the first ones to surf. That's documented by Europeans and stuff like that. So I'm not making this stuff up. You know, it's all in the book if you want to get it. I have a PDF copy. So anybody who wants that, send that to, you know, I think I gave it to Shannon and Jia, but I can resend it out again. You're more than welcome to have it.
Can I put it on the website?
Yeah, don't put it on the website and stuff like that, but I'll you know, send it out via, you know. But you know, he talks a lot about our history with the water. We were natural open water swimmers. That's who we were. We lived near the coast 99% of the time. We were at the ocean, we were at a river, a bay, an estuary, a fjord, wherever it was, that's where we were. The reason why is because that's where the main food source was that we could get at. And so over time, they learned how to fashion canoes, or fashion, you know, I guess rudimentary stand-up paddle boards, if you want to call it that, and went out there to fish. Black children are often taught as young as 6 months, because that was the most optimal time for someone to get comfortable in water, as we all know, even though it took me another 43 years to get there, but, you know, nonetheless, to start swimming. So that's when they did it. It's very important to remember that, you know, this is something that's been going on for a long time in Africa. And even during the slave trade, when we were brought over here, the first 150, 200 years, we had a strong swimming background. I'm sure you've all seen the iconic images of like drawings of, you know, all these Africans just jammed inside slave ships, you know, packed in like beyond sardine limitations, or like in these bunk beds that are literally 6 feet, you know, high, and about less than, like, you know, 10 to 20 inches wide to put them in there. Now, there are several reasons for that. Obviously, one of the main reasons is to try to get as much quote unquote property in there as they humanly could. That was certainly one of them. One of the other reasons was to prevent mutiny. If you're shackled down and if you're in tight quarters and whatever and stuff like that, you can't really move about. But the main number one reason of why they chained people down, why they packed them in, why they kept them underground is for one irrefutable reason. Any chance they saw an opportunity to jump over the ship, they would. Not to drown themselves, but to swim away. The overwhelming majority for the first 200 to 300 years were phenomenal swimmers. They were absolutely phenomenal swimmers. And that was one of the chief reasons of why they were held down there for so long. In Senegal, they have this island called Gorée. And Gorée is a small island, no bigger than possibly Alcatraz, maybe a little bit larger than that. And it has what's called the door of no return. The door of no return is the one that was the last one you walked through before you were going to get on a ship and head to the New World, whether it be in the Caribbean or here in the United States. And over time, most slaves realized that, or Africans, I don't want to call them slaves yet because they still weren't there. And what they would do is like in chains, leg irons, and ones fastened around their wrists, is they would sprint back as fast as you could, like those images you used to see on the old movies of when they had the chain gangs and everybody was connected to each other, jump in the water and literally swim the 3.5 miles back to the mainland of Senegal. This also happened in Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, a lot of other different places. But I emphasize Senegal for one main reason. Every year for the last 34 years, they have had what's known as the Dakar de Gorée swim. It is mostly Africans who swim in it. There are a few whites from France because Senegal was a former colony and they come, but overwhelmingly, there's a sea of black faces, which used to get me so excited when I first found out about it. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, oh my God, it's finally some, open water event where I'm not the only one out there, or maybe one or two that I have to run up to, which is a really exciting thing. So, this history, which is well documented in Kevin Dawson's book, stretches back eons. So I'd encourage you to read that. Obviously, I think a lot of you, show of hands, who's read Jeff Wiltse's Contested Waters, Social History of Swimming Pools in America. Okay, that's another great one. By the way, shameless plug, Jeff Wiltse's on my podcast today. He's a good friend of mine, so if you want to hear some of his information, you can check out my podcast and listen to that. But just for the social context of the United States, and I'll keep it on here for the rest of the time, is that the United States, when the bathhouses were first made, because at least originally, when immigrants and blacks who started migrating up to the north wanted to bathe, their only options were a lake, a stream, or whatever. So for them, hey, strip down, jump in there. Now, the Victorian era was appalled at this, obviously, because they saw these ragamuffins out in the middle, frolicking and just burying themselves all, and they were really upset about this. So they started building these bathhouses specifically for they could have immigrants and blacks bathe. Mostly it was for hygienic reasons and stuff like that, to slow the spread of disease. So back in the early part of, or in the 19th century here, blacks and whites, bathed together all the time. It wasn't uncommon and stuff like that. Gender roles prohibited, men and women from bathing together, but not blacks and whites. That didn't start occurring until the massive municipal pools started being built here in the 20s and the 30s. There was Fairgrounds Pool in St. Louis, which was one of the first ones. There was, I want to call it Holland Park. Yeah, that's right, Holland Park in Pittsburgh. And of course, the largest one in my neck of the woods, Flyshacker Pool, which, was so big they had to have rowboats, lifeguards and rowboats, literally in the pool. It was like, I think 1,000 feet wide and 1,500 feet long or something. It was gigantic. And over the time, these places weren't just like, massive pools. They were actually like kind of like little beach resorts. They would have like little, they'd import sand in from the shore. They'd, put up little cabanas, and families would come and they'd hang out, and their kids would be there, and everybody would be having a lot of fun and just frolicking. And this was also a great meeting place, you know, for the mothers to talk with other mothers, guys to talk with other guys that they work with on a casual basis, and also for kids to talk, boys talking to girls and vice versa. And so there started to be this kind of cross-gender fraternization. And along during this time when that started happening, there started being new attire being worn at these beaches, or excuse me, at these pools. Originally, you know, they had these long floppy things. I'm sure you've seen the photos. They were like wool. They were kind of bloomers and stuff like that. If you know, if any of us jumped in the water like that today, you know, we'd sink like stones. But you know, at the time, that's what they used, you know, for their bathing costumes, because they literally bathed in them. That's what they did. But over time, Annette Kellerman, who's an Australian, a noted swimmer, so a lot of us know about, wore her scandalous one piece, and young ladies started wearing that. And so over time, you know, other young ladies started wearing that, and as the progression started happening, you know, guys would flirt with the girls a lot more because, you know, guys love flirting with, you know, girls in bathing suits. And over time, the bathing suits started getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the guys started taking off their shirts, you know, to show their muscles and all the rest of that, to counteract, you know, oh, I can look just as, you know, beautiful and, you know, in my clothing or out of it as you can. And as this began to happen, that's when they really started instituting the racial divide. One of the chief reasons was they, you know, basically said that blacks wore highly sexualized, that the men would probably end up seeing these women scantily dressed and probably try to attack them. So that's when it first started happening, where there started being a racial exclusion. Some of it in the South, it was, you know, it was legal to do that. In the North, it wasn't legal, obviously, but it was enforced. It was enforced by the swimmers themselves. If blacks tried to come to these pools, especially in the North, they were beaten, they were stoned. Some of them were held underwater until they nearly drowned. All of this was occurring during that time. Police were stationed at the place, but they did nothing to stop it. So it was mostly left up to the swimmers for, you know, the police could get a pass for saying that they're not breaking the law. So all this is to say that, you know, over time within this country, and just to backtrack, during the period of slavery, like I said, the first 200 years, you know, we were noted swimmers, but over time when, you know, slave masters realized they were losing property, they started near drownings of their slaves, especially the kids. And they would tell them of stories of, you know, monsters in the deep that only specifically ate black children. So you better not go near the water. So over the next, you know, 200 years, we had swimming drowned out of us. And it kept perpetuating itself over the decades. And now we're at the place where there is, you know, not necessarily segregation. There's self-segregation, to be sure, but there's still discrimination. I know of 2 incidents this past July where people who were African American were denied access to the pool simply because they were black. A mother and a son down in Florida. It's always in Florida. And then another few people, I think, who were in Coral Gables, Florida, who were denied access to the pool. So, you know, part of this is institutionalized racism that's gone on. Part of it is to the point where blacks self-segregated and said, hey, listen, black people don't swim. I get that all the time with people when I tell them, oh, you know, I swim. He says, oh, do you go to pools? It's rarely. I said, I mostly swim out in open water. And everyone looks on in horror saying, you're absolutely psychotic. Why are you doing that? And I said, I love swimming out in open water. That's what I love to do. I said, that's our lineage. That's our heritage. We have swum out in open water for years. And black folk look at me like I'm, you know, speaking in tongues, that I'm absolutely crazy. And we've held on to that illusion that we don't swim. And when I bring up, you know, people like Charles Chapman, who was the first African-American to swim the English Channel back in 1981 in 12 and a half hours. When I bring up Pauline Jackson, who was a part of that Wrigley's swim, you know, across the Catalina Channel, not the first one, but the second one. She, you know, everyone claims that it was the first one, but it's not true. She even said she wasn't at the first one. and the things that she did. Willis Hanks, who tried 5 times to swim the English Channel, nearly made it, I think on the 3rd time, 3 miles out, but it just totally went crazy and he had to be pulled. Walter Johnson, who was also a great marathon swimmer, and a number of others who I can't even remember half the time, who have done things. And this is to say that, one of my jobs is to try to educate people about our history, because I think it's very important. You're not going to be motivated to do something unless you understand the history behind it. At least that's my belief. And that's something that's very important. So one of the things that I want to leave you with, and I'll end right here because I tend to ramble and stuff like that about, Black history, especially in aquatic history. I get obsessed with this, is that the history of it, if you really want to have a starting point, read the history, read Undercurrents of Power. That's basically what I'm saying. Read Contested Waters. Marilyn Morgan Westerner is going to be putting out a book specifically about African-American marathon swimmers next year. And obviously I don't know the title of it yet because that title hasn't been decided, but she's also an amazing historian that's done a lot of great work. She, and I kind of combined to make sure that, people understand, especially about Pauline Jackson, and all the amazing swims that she did. So there is this fountain of information. I'm here. I'll do it free of charge. You can always email me. You can, if we're Facebook friends, you can PM me. I'm fine with that. I can talk about this for the day is long, as well as resources in the area if you want to learn more, because there are a number of resources nationwide. Organizations like Black Kids Swim, Diversity in Aquatics, they've been doing phenomenal work. If you live in Florida, try to contact Lee Pitts Jr. If you're in the Philadelphia area, obviously Jim Ellis. If you're near Washington, go to Howard University and talk to Nick Askew, the head coach of Howard University. These people will take the time to talk to you about the history. Don't be afraid. But if you can't do any of that, just contact me. So I'm going to take a step back. If people have questions, and I'm praying that you do, please feel free and ask those questions. So unmute yourself and ask the question.
Much.
Hey Naji, this is Ching. How are you doing? Thanks for getting on today.
No
well,
problem.
I guess I don't really have a question necessarily, but I wanted to kind of share a story because your story about Senegal really reminded me of this. Earlier this year, I had the awesome opportunity to go to Sierra Leone and to do a swim there actually with my friend Louise out of New York. And one of the things that I had learned through that swim was we wanted to swim from the mainland Sierra Leone to Banana Island. And Banana Island is basically the gateway of a lot of the slave trade. Right. And just learning about that history was just so powerful. And to be able to be in those waters, it just really kind of put me in, I felt like I was part of history to feel what those people have felt. What was extremely surprising and a little distressing for me was that, the inhabitants of Banana Island, they are all fishermen and they all go in their canoes to go get fish and go to mainland and do all this stuff. No one knows how to swim. It was amazing. It was baffling that when we went there, the idea of 2 women believing that they could swim across a 5-mile channel from mainland to Banana Island, which is why would you, well, first of all, who are you? And then why would you even think to do this? But it was really great because when we did do it, I saw the impact on the people there, and, they started believing themselves that they could do things like that. And I just, I guess it's hard for me to continue having that impact, and I want to continue having a relationship with the people there. It's unfortunately a little further away, but I'd love to talk to you, after this or in the future about continuing that spirit there.
Absolutely, I'm on board.
I used to live on St. Croix, and there were obviously a lot of fishermen there too, and so few of the people, the Crucians, or there were a lot of Puerto Rican and Dominican fishermen as well, and they didn't know how to swim. There were so many drownings every year of people who fell out of their boat. It was just incredible, and yeah, so.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up, Lynn, because one of the things, and apologies for anybody who backs them and stuff like that, I have huge issues with them. And Bruce Weigel and I were just talking about this morning, is neither of us are really fans of the Make a Splash program. And the reason being is that a lot of programs that are out there right now teach people how to, kids how to be drown proof. And my first question when I heard that is, what the heck does that mean, drown proof? I mean, it's just, when you talk about that, Bruce and I are of the opinion that I don't want people to be drowned. I want people to get to the point where they are so comfortable in water, it is just second nature to them. Any of us, when we jump off boats or when we go off the beach and stuff like that, we have a blast. We can be out there all day. That's just who we are. And as far as I'm concerned, that should be everybody. Because as we all know, there are elite swimmers who swam in the pool all of their lives. And some of them have ended up drowning in open water because they don't know what to do. I mean, I've said it a million times before, you can have the same pool sets again and again and again and again and again in the pool. You will never have the same open water swim twice, ever. We all know that. Doesn't matter if it's flat for the next 20 years, doesn't matter if it's rocking and rolling, whatever, it's always different. It's either, hey, it was really choppy out there today, there were big swells, but no chop. The sea lion kept following me for the entire practice, or my classic case at Aquatic Park, and I don't know how I pulled this off. At 4 a.m. in the morning, I run into somebody else. How do you do that in that big place? I always manage to do that. I am very gifted at running into people, though. All that different stuff that happens. It always happens again and again and again. The currents, all these different things. So my point being is that, drown proofing is one thing, but one of the things that I'm emphasizing is that we keep on getting them more and more proficient. If I had it my way, kids would be in swim clubs from literally first grade through the 12th. After each grade, your matriculation depends on you knowing how to be more proficient in the water. You don't make it, hey, get ready for summer school because it's coming, because you're going to take that class again. The world is 2/3 water. We cannot afford to have that. I don't think, I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but I really believe that. I honestly believe that. And, that's one of the things that I'm trying to push, here in the Bay Area, is to have that. Because there was a time when it was a requirement, but it hasn't been for years. In Australia, and granted, obviously it's a lot smaller than we are, I remember I was dating somebody back in the mid-2000s, and I went to visit her one time. And it was in the summer, which was obviously December time for them. And I was amazed, number one, of the natatoriums that were there that were public. I mean, they're like the size of football fields. It's cheap to go there. They have like 6 different pools. Constantly, they're doing swim coaching, whatever. And on top of that, when I came home, every other TV ad was, make sure that you have a fence around your pool. Sign up for this elite swim club program. Oh, and the next, sport that we have on involves open water swimming and running or something. It was like that constant. And I literally was just like glued. I was like, oh my God. I said, you guys have this all the time? And she says, yeah, and they're just like second nature to them. And it was just like, wow, this is so revelatory, how well they take it. Now, granted, a lot of people live on the coast. I get that. But a lot of people in this country live on the coast, or they live near a lake, or they live near a pond, or they live near a stream or a river or something like that. And the drowning rates, as you said, happen all the time. And it doesn't have to be that way. So we need to go beyond just the drown-proof thing and really get people comfortable in water, in particular open water. Because, In a pool, I can always grab onto a lane line, even if I'm freaking out, or grab onto a wall. Eventually, I can get there. You know, you fall into a natural body of water, as we all know, and you don't know what to do. That's it. You're gone. Inside of 30 seconds, you're done.
Yeah.
Told you I love to talk about this stuff, especially pertaining to Black folk.
Really interesting. As you talk about it, the solution grasping part of my mind starts thinking,
Yeah.
oh, you know, because I thought back to the first time I ever went to the Caribbean. I went to this little island called South Caicos, and I was on a marine parks management kind of trip, and we had a little compound, and it had a saltwater pool. So kids there, and they were pretty much all Black. The native population was Black, and they were swimming. They would just kind of jump off the dock and swim in the shallow areas and play, but they weren't really swimming because their feet would touch and stuff. So then some of them would just come into the compound, and we'd try to teach them to swim in the deep end of the saltwater pool. But then as I was hearing about these experiences from places, I also thought that's kind of a phenomenon from everywhere from New York City to a lot of countries. A lot of times it also affects gender. But then I was thinking, what's the common reason? And so first I thought solution-oriented. Money. People need money to go into facilities, and they need the time, because time is money. They need the time to go and then get this instruction. So I was starting to think that way, but then I thought it's also culture. And what you were saying about feeling that the valuation of swimming and the techniques of swimming were drowned out of your people, your ancestors, and the people, all their descendants. It's just, I feel like that can be tackled from the adult end, and just through bringing that valuation back. Because a lot of times, sure, we see the way that marathon swimming can be expensive, but when it comes to getting instruction or finding someone in the community or even outside of your community who happens to know to swim to start getting you comfortable with the water, a lot of that can be free. And I think it can start with parents and guardians. It's like the first time I ever had that thought, but I was thinking about a coworker, and I spent so much time swimming with her daughter, and I at another coworker's house that had a pool, and I couldn't believe it because I was like, holy crap, and no one else wanted to go to the pool. All the adults wanted to have cocktails, and of course I said, anytime you want to jump into the pool, because she reminded me of when I was a kid, and I always had to rely on someone to get in the water. And as I was in the water, I thought, oh my God, because has someone to be with, and she's comfortable. I witnessed her become comfortable with the deep end, because she started off like, I've never gone where my feet don't go, and I didn't do anything. All I was just kind of there. So then I started saying to her mom, oh, you know, you should get her into swimming. And she just sort of, it's not that she didn't value it, but and I'm not making a remark about her culture or background, but I'm talking about general culture, where like the parents are the ones, or the guardians are the ones who could lead their kids and put them in that situation, regardless of what it costs or doesn't cost. And then if they don't have that same kind of motivation to do it, then it's just not going to happen. And also the ideas of having public schools, you know, I know there are a number of organizations trying to get that going. But so it comes back to, for me, the question of how to get people to think of swimming as important enough to just bring it into their lives again and into the lives of their kids. Because yeah, for me, I was in a mother-baby class because my dad was worried about my survival, because he'd had a lifetime on the streets and stuff. So everything for him was really about raw survival. And I really think that's why I got into it early. But for everybody else, I don't know, just pondering that. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts.
SIBOs, there's, I mean, for individuals, for swim groups, or it doesn't have to be an organization, but I know Aquatic Park has 2 clubs. And so Sibbo's in Brooklyn gives these clinics every weekend. I don't remember if it's Saturday or Sunday or both, but they give clinics for people, and they have a lot of the people that come are people who are doing the triathlon, some of whom are afraid to put their head underwater. They come to this clinic like the week before the New York City Triathlon, and they said, "Can you help me put my head underwater? I'm afraid to put my head underwater, and I'm swimming, I've got to swim in the triathlon." It's pretty amazing. But they give these amazing clinics to people, and they get a lot of people. They get 10, 12 people, and it's all volunteer. I don't think there's a cost to it, but I do think you have to be a member.
There is. Yeah, I think there's like a nominal like $10 fee or something like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think that's relatively new. I don't think that there used to be a cost to it. But anyway, it's a real amazing public service, and there are people who have swum in pools that never swim in the open water, and it's really an intro to open water, and they take them out, a few feet, and then they just have them float, and currents happen, and if you see this building going this way, the current is going with you, and it's just an amazing thing to watch and be a part of. It's very cool.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to say on the topic. One, I agree with Sibbo's, by the way. I'm a happy product of that. Capri took me out, 8 years ago and explained to me how to make sure I knew which way the current was going and everything. So even though I could swim, I didn't necessarily know how to swim in the ocean safely. Right. But there's 2 things. One is it used to be in New York City that in order to graduate high school, you had to be able to swim 25 yards, right? And it was part of education. And I think that there's something there that says, we spend an awful lot of money and energy and everything on sports in this country, much more so than I think we should. But if we can ante up for the football team all the time, which by the way, doesn't save anybody's life and probably costs a few, then part of the conversation is, how is this not important enough? How is this not a life skill? How is this not part of gym class? How is this not? I mean, some of the classes people have to take in, I'd happily give up an English class or a history class, even though I love those topics, to see people literally get into swimming for a whole semester, enough that they can make it across, understand how to float, and actually get their face in the water and swim a little. So I think that's part of it, which is we used to have this, but it doesn't exist anymore. And I'm not really sure why it stopped. The other thing is I now live down south, which is an interesting place. So I live around Charleston, which we have nothing but water, right? And by the way, we spent a ton of money on football. And we just spent North Charleston, which is a fairly poor county or city, I guess it is, North Charleston, just spent, I don't know how many millions of dollars to build a pool. It's a beautiful pool. You know what? It's going to be used by the high school swim team and masters, and there doesn't seem to be anything beyond that. There is a program that is funded by one of the open water swims down here that we do called the Splash, that the money they raise goes to a program called LAPS, which is Low Country Aquatic something or other. But basically, to the point of, it teaches children not to drown, which is not anywhere near the same as actually swimming. So I think as taxpayers and people, some of you who have kids, don't have kids, whatever, like, I don't know, towns are funding all kinds of sports. And one of the ways we can make our voices heard is that way, which says we consider this an important thing for all children to have access to be taught. And the other thing is, I think, I don't know where I was reading it, but at some point, if you teach the mother to swim, the kids swim, right? You got to break the cycle, right? So one of the things a lot of us are involved in is USMS to some degree or another. And they do adult learn to swim, which, 4 Saturdays in 1 month for an hour each is not enough. It is nowhere near enough. And I think that that's one of the other places that there's an opportunity to say, like, all right, we all swim, we swim pools or open water, blah, 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 blah. And we spend, I don't know about you, but I'm slow. When I have to swim 30,000 yards in a week, it's a lot of hours. Somehow there has to be enough hours in our lives to give back. If we can get a parent to swim, we then take care of the next generation, right? So I think that's the other thing. We tend to focus very much on children, which I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I'm also a believer that and no offense, I'm going to be sexist here, but teach a mama to swim, she'll take care of her babies. As a general rule, I'm sorry, but that's what been my experience in life. So, and I think there's some other areas that we have leverage and a place to be a voice.
Yeah, I think what you're bringing up is really important, Jeannie. I've been a big advocate of, adults learning to swim. I'm one of them, and I think that's extremely, extremely important that, if the parents don't know how, the parents need to be offered how to swim just as well. Because you're right, you will have more of an emphasis to impart that onto your child. The other part of it for me, at least for my community, and one thing that I'm really also trying to push, and I'm trying to get it started sometime in the fall with others, is I'm trying to form a Black Coaches Swim Association nationwide, where, it's everything from like the elite colleges down to like the YMCAs and everywhere in between, where we can have the resources to like fan out all over in the communities all over the country to try to get more kids and their parents into the water. Because one of the other parts of some of these studies is, if you see someone that looks like you doing a certain thing and doing it well, chances are you're going to want to try and do that too. That's just what's going to happen. And one of the things that I get a lot of times is when, people say, why do you swim out in open water? And I said, I'm following in the footsteps of Pauline Jackson, Charles Chapman, all those guys. And they look at me like, like I'm coming from Mars. I said, who are they? And I realized, and I said, you know what, you're right. I said, outside of myself, Mina Roden, Alice Deering, Vicki Watson, maybe a few others. There's not many of us in the marathon swim community. There's not a lot of us. And there's a number of reasons. Jia brought up one of them. Some of that. This is expensive. We all know what happens the minute that your foot touches that water and that clock starts. That's it. The money's theirs. Doesn't matter what happens after that. They're going to get paid. So it's a big expense. To possibly be out there for an hour, or to go over to England and sit around for 2 weeks watching crappy weather come after. One after the other. Is like saying, I just now spent $6,000 to get here and I can't even swim, and now I got to turn around and go home. I mean, we know the risk of that. So that's the other part of it, and a lot of people say, I can't afford it. I understand that. So that's why one of the things that I'm trying to do, and I'm mainly just saying it for the marathon swim community, because that's my main focus, although, I love the open water community, is trying to find other ways to lessen that expense. Or that being said, getting an observer to like watch them do something across some lake in their area, all it has to do is be 6.2 miles and it counts, and try to make it as inexpensive as it can be for more people to be able to participate, or to have a wider one where a lot of people can be involved and it's still a 10K. And if you complete it under our standard rules, hey, you're in the group. I mean, I know about Kim Rutherford, who I know is on this call, and Catherine know about this, but there's one in Santa Barbara that's, a 10K here. I think it's like $100. All you need to do is get a friend to kayak for you. You follow the same marathon swimming rules. It's 6.2, and you just go across a certain portion of the Santa Barbara shoreline, come back in. It counts. And it's only $100 to like qualify for it, So there are places that it can happen, but the cost is a factor. Startup costs are always a challenge and stuff like that, and definitely in open water and stuff like that, they're always there. But that being said, getting back to what you said earlier, Jeannie, is that it is important, to have that representation, whether it be parents, coaches who look like you, or other swimmers who look like you out there. That's why they have the Black Invitational Swim Meet every year, the Black History Month Swim Meet up in DC. Because that affords African American kids, when they are on those blocks, when they are on that deck, they turn around, oh, you're nothing special, you look just like him. I would love, like I said to Shannon, to get to the point one day where after I've trained someone, for a marathon swim, they says, oh man, I just now finished the Cook Straight. He says, yeah, that's exciting. That is a really exciting thing. Too bad that you're like, what? It's not that special. You're the 76th African American to do it. You ain't that good. Says it would have been cool if you were the first or the first woman, but 76, good for you, but you're just another number. I want to get to that point. Caroline's a great, swimmer for the North Channel. We all know that. She's phenomenal. She's dominated that thing. But she's one of several people that have done it, all of whom have been white. I want to get to the point where there's like 20 to 25 other Black people, men or women, who are doing it, to that number. That's what I want, where it gets to the point now where just like saying, he's just one of us and stuff like that. He did the swim, good for him, but, number 125, all right, dude, you get your name up on the little database, that's all you get. That's where I want to get. So
I think Catherine wanted to say.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I have some comments to make. I think they're like from several people back. First comment is about anti-drowning versus teaching to swim. I think it's really important for all of us onto this call to just recognize like we are all exceptional and extremely unique individuals and that we love open water marathon swimming and we don't understand why everyone else doesn't love it too. I have a lot of friends who are extremely talented swimmers and they hate the ocean. So I love the idea of getting more people into the sport, but I think we just need to recognize that some people just don't have any interest. And if African Americans are dying at a disproportionate rate due to drowning, then I think anti-drowning prevention is important. And I actually give a lot of swim lessons to first-time adult swimmers or kids, and sometimes they hate the water. They hate it. And the only thing they want out of that lesson is to be able to get from one side to the other without touching the bottom, so knowing that they're water safe. And for me, that's the biggest win. If someone can know that they can fall into a body of water and get out safely, I'm like, one less person is going to die from a water related incident. So I want people to learn how to swim and I want people to love the water, but that's just frankly not the reality all the time. And then I know, like, in response to Janine's comment about like sports getting so much money, football and baseball might not save someone's life and they're drowning, but it can save a lot of kids' life in getting them out of maybe a situation that they're in or giving them opportunities. So I think, like I kind of said, like swimming's not a huge priority for people. For me, like what I struggle with is knowing how many pools there are. I live in Northern California and there's so many pools and country clubs and like housing play. Like I have a pool in my apartment complex and I give swim lessons in it. And it's like, there's so many pools and why can't we figure out how to give lessons easier? Like I wanted to give lessons for the Boys and Girls Club of Oakland, and we wanted to organize it so that all 3 clubhouses could go swim at one of the high schools nearby. And it was just like, there was so much like red tape up. And it's like, how can we get over that? And how can we make it easier to get access to water, like in a pool? And then, when it's easy to get into the water and it's easy to swim and you're having fun with it, then, maybe surfing and paddleboarding and swimming open water become more of a possibility. So I don't know. Those are just kind of like some thoughts I had. They don't really relate to anything, but I did want to say, let's see. who made a comment? Oh, Jocelyn, about swim lessons with parent kids. So they actually are doing that in my county right now. Is the way coaches are coaching is the parent has to be in the water with the kids. So that's definitely an option. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Bridget, like drown proofing, that is swimming. I guess it depends what you define swimming as. Is swimming doing proper freestyle and enjoying it, or is drown proofing being able to scull and kick in the water? So I don't know. I guess my two questions are like, what are we defining swimming as, and how do we get more access to pools? So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks for sharing that. I think the feelings you share just show, it goes to show that if you're thinking about ways to approach it, it's really multi-pronged. And I think sometimes there can be, and this is actually allegorical for being Asian in the black-white dialogue, but that this feeling that if you're advocating for something, you're not always taking away from something else. I've like turned over a new leaf and wanted to feel like whichever way we go about it. And I think this leads back to the introspection piece. So I bet all of us are thinking about our own angle on this. Who, when you talk about affecting culture, something you said, Catherine, about if you're teaching kids and they don't like the water, and then I'm really sensitive to the idea of that fine line between someone not liking something and someone identifying with a certain culture or values, where that ends and where that takes over and where someone's actual preference begins. So it's hard because you can't be like, oh, you're say you have a black kid and you're teaching them to swim and they're basically kicking and screaming. You can't be like, hey, did you know your ancestors, we're not in the position to say that. So I look at Korean people. I'm Korean American, and I remember looking up some swimmers. Every time I feel like if I go on vacation, there's always a Korean tourist afraid to put their feet in the water and a wave hits them and it's this huge scene, and it just upsets me. But probably because I love swimming and there's a lot of projection going on. But I also thought, Korea's a peninsula, might as well be an island. It's a place where it still has all the women are getting old and dying now, but they're indigenous female free divers who were the seat of the economy in Korea, as well as parts of Japan. And it makes me feel like I want to get people back to their roots, but I don't even know how. So I guess this is just a question out there, not so much about solutions per se, but when you're introspecting, how do you bring that culture back? I guess what I'm saying is getting people back to this idea of roots, and that should be for all human beings, that swimming is a certain level of swimming is not beyond any of us, and that really doesn't cost money or have to do with facilities. But I really appreciate your work, because definitely California is like a mecca of all pools, and they're just pools lying there fallow constantly, including on Cal campus. Like when I go there, no one's ever in the pool, and I'm just like, oh my God. So yeah, thanks for doing what you're doing. And then yeah, from my vantage point, I'm curious to hear what everyone else is thinking right now, kind of what your angle is. But when it comes to that roots culture kind of thing, it's hard, because I've got for instance, a group of Black friends, and they've said to me, oh, you're so crazy, we don't swim because our hair. And I can't say to them, hey, that's not necessarily your culture, because the hair thing has become adopted as culture. And if there's I can't think of an analogy right now, but if there's something about that with Asian culture, I kind of rail against it, but that's me. And then, like, upon visiting other cultures, I've seen where people really do feel that's their culture, that is their preference. They really don't like the water. And so when you have the historical perspective, then what can you do? Even knowing that some of it is really this baked in, internalized robbing of old culture, old skills, and old valuations, in my opinion. You know, like a lot of the things that Korean people, Black people, etc., people have lost are because of modernization or colonization or a lot of things. And then it becomes the culture of today and just the way that people live today, you know, what they think they like, what they don't like. So it goes so deep. I think that's part of the issue why there's not an easy way out, really.
I want to go back to something that both Catherine brought up, and I think a couple other people brought up with regards to the access. We have to remember that back in the 50s, when desegregation started happening in the pools, whites left those pools in droves. And over time, those pools got more and more dilapidated and just got run down, and they were useless at that time. And nothing was replaced with respect to those pools. That phenomenon is still going on to this day in a lot of areas where people are marginalized, people of color, in particular where a lot of African Americans are. That is a huge, huge challenge. I mean, you know, the access to pools, you know, is one thing that, you know, is probably the primary thing, and we need to sit with and realize that part of that was by design. That, you know, you don't see a lot within, you know, urban areas. You don't see a lot of pools. And the places where you do, and you're right, Jia, we have a lot here in California, but most of them are in the suburbs or in the people's backyards, or, you know, like on Cal campus or San Francisco State or some of the other state-run and private institutions. So, but the urban pools, even here in California, are just, they're not there, you know, or people don't know anything about it because there's just no access. And so we just need to sit with that. I'm not saying, you know, what's the answer and stuff like that, because, you know, there is no easy answer. There's a lot of, you know, what do they call it? Urban renewal, gentrification, whatever it is and stuff like that, you know, that's happening, but it's not being geared towards getting more pools set up. I know that. And, you know, the access, people have to go a long way to try to get that in certain, you know, certain communities. And most of those fall on communities of color. So I just wanted to bring that up, to keep that in our focus.
Thank you, Naji, and everybody for all your comments. I do want to be respectful of people's time. We have about 9 more minutes. And I guess one of the things, as we're talking about things and I'm grasping for solutions, which is my nature, I wanted to have Naji maybe talk to us. You said just now, like, sit with that. And of course I'm like, well, how long? How long do I have to sit with that? When can I start doing something? So maybe you could just give us another moment there to close with, you know, the cautions to action, to taking immediate action. And if you have anything else to add to that, Naji or Jia, just Jia.
Okay, I'll make it really quick. Yeah, I think with the sitting with it, you know, give us some time, and, you know, like I said, read up on some history. You know, like I said, Contested Waters is a great book to start with, and Undercurrents of Power is another great one. And I'm sure there's a number of others. I can find them for you if you want. It's no problem. So, but after that, if you want to try to get started, reach out to Diversity in Aquatics, which is online. They're a great resource, or Black Kids Swim. Those are the ones that I'm talking about solely. There are tons of others that I'm sure that Jia will probably know about, but those would be the first two that I would say to start off with. There's a lot of people who want to do things, and they are doing phenomenal things. They always have been. They've been out there for a long time doing stuff, and they have a lot of really solid advice. I'm very close to Ebony Rosman, who's the founder and executive director of Black Kids Swim. And I work with diversity in aquatics a lot out here in the West. So that's where I would start. But before all that happens, read up on it. And you know what? It doesn't hurt to ask your friends of color, you know, what their experiences have been, and just sit there and listen. And the conversation might be uncomfortable, but allow yourself to be uncomfortable. Remember, it's a long, long swim, and there's going to be some choppy water out there, and there's going to be some big swells.
Good. And one of the things I think you mentioned from our prep session about needing to know the history is so we don't repeat the same mistakes again. So that's one reason we don't want to just jump to doing something, because we might create more problems than solutions.
And it's probably obvious to everyone that I'm the worst imposter because I'm still thinking of solutions. So, so I appreciate this advice a lot. And another thing that I bet would be nice for all of us is to, though maybe it is kind of solution trending, but just to think about your angle and who your own values. Why do you value swimming? What opened those doors for you, which we kind of did an introduction to the first meeting, but to really think why that was available to you. I mean, a lot of us were drawn to the water, but I know, Naji, in your interview that when you expressed interest in swimming and somebody who was in a position that you were actually looking up to them and studying with that person just made a comment that Black people don't swim, and then that kept you for years. Just if you imagine what the equivalent of that would be for you, that would have kept you away, you know. Just yeah.
I have a question, Shannon.
Yes.
Hi. So just reading how this was going to play out, I kind of assumed that we would have more of a discussion, and maybe it could be for another meeting, on if people have programs that include swimmers that have not had access to pools, like Catherine said, where she's trying to get a pool to create a program, that we would have kind of a roundhouse about how that can work. And those of us, we have a program here locally, and it goes through the junior high. 80% of the kids at the junior high do not know how to swim. They live literally 2 to 3 blocks from the beach. So we have a program that was given to our pool that I happen to be affiliated with through a funding through Bill Simpkins, and he funds their program. So those kids' PE class is swim lessons in junior high every year. So I thought, and trying to find other pools to start these programs at for kids that are younger, instead of waiting till they're junior high, so we don't have the high numbers in drowning rates. I would like to see people come to the table with ideas and plans and contacts of how to get those programs started. Did you go through the mayor? Did you go through city schools? Did you go through the county government office? What did you do? I mean, we are dealing with that right now just because of COVID, like going up the ladder in different entities, private pools versus public pools versus school districts and all that. So I would hope that maybe we could have a meeting that addresses those things and we could share information with each other. That's my 2 cents here today.
I appreciate that a lot. And I love that there's so many people out there that are, you know, you're doing things and you want to collaborate. As I understand what you're saying, you want to collaborate and get notes on like how to affect change. And I love that. and I want to facilitate that as much as possible. I guess as I tried to open the last meeting in this one as well, as I just want to be a better human, and I want to be able to figure out how I can affect change in my own community as well. But we're all coming from different places, and I think my purpose today was just really just to, you know, open our minds a little bit, and, you know, and just be here and be present and have.
Shannon, if I could really fast before we close, Kim, that's a great idea, and, you know, I really commend you for doing that. If you want, I can put you in touch with Ebony Rosman of Black Kids Swim, because she has a number of ways of handling that. She's really good on that front. So I can, you know, try to get you that information ASAP if you'd like.
Thank you.
And also look other programs like that you might want to emulate, like in Asphalt Green, where I used to swim when I lived in New York. They have a program. It's a drown-proofing program, but they're in a very affluent neighborhood, but it's right up against projects. So they take kids from the projects, and actually Leah Neal was a product of that program. And they take kids from projects and they teach them how to swim every Sunday. And it's a volunteer run, but it's an expensive program because time in that pool is expensive. So I think that they have fundraisers for that program every year. It'd be good to get a list of programs that are intentionally reaching out and see how they do it. See what they do. Great idea.
Yeah, Gia was putting some notes in the chat too about aggregating this information is something that I'd like to figure out a way to organize it, aggregate it, and make it available. If it isn't already done already, I'm not a fan of redundancy. So if it's being done, I want to point people to where things are being done. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time today. And if you do have resources and contacts or things that you do want me to share on my site, I'm super glad to do that. And other than that, thank you. Anything else, you guys? All right, and she put a lot of her contact information on there, but you can't find her on any social media. All right, you guys, have a great afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And see you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.